Hey guys, back again for another GSL qualifier cast. We have another winners finals from the first qualifier. And as you can see, it is bottom left Solar versus top right Byun. So one of these players will make it through the GSL. Lickety split. We'll have to go down to the losers bracket and won't have to try again possibly on the second qualifier. Both players certainly anticipated to get through GSL, which begins very soon actually. So, you know, only so much time to get these qualifiers in, I guess, before everything's split anyway. But yeah, both players are certainly anticipated to get in. A lot because Korea doesn't have the same depth of players as it once did, where GSL was a grueling test, and many of the, let's say, so-called favorites actually possibly could not make it in. There was a time in which it was also a bigger tournament, so there was 32 players instead of what is now, I believe, 24. But anyway, so not to be starting every video off with too sad of a note, but just a reminder that you can support the GSL and the Korean StarCraft scene by going to patreon.com/GSL and get your hands on these replays, as well as behind-the-scenes interviews and all that good stuff. But let's go and talk about these players, right? So pretty evenly matched. I mean, I would say, I guess I'm leaning kind of more towards Solar actually getting through. Very dependable Zerg player, and certainly one of the best in Korea, if not the best. Dark and him basically always tangoing, right? Whereas Byun, I mean, obviously one of the best in Korea. The players that we have left who make it in the GSL are automatically one of the best in Korea. But as far as being the absolute best Terran, well, not quite, right? We do have Maru up there, who is very reliable against Solar. This was Maru versus Solar. Sorry, Solar. You're not winning. And then you have Cure as well, who's been maybe a little less reliable, but, I mean, not really. Both players that I just mentioned having really quite good runs at Katowice. Byun had a very good run as well, just not quite. I mean, literally, you could look at the Katowice results and say that is the order of things in Korea for these Korean Terrans, actually, which is quite fun. But regardless, so Byun, while he might be the third best Terran, shall we just throw that out there, still obviously can take it to possibly the first best Zerg. He is going for a Command Center first build this time. Byun, having moved away from doing his 2 racks over and over and over again, saving it for certain maps, certain positions, and the entire best of 3, of which this is just a regular old best of 3 for the qualifying match. Has always, I guess, had the Command Center first alongside his 2 racks, but he's really gone back to, I would say, even mostly going for the 1 racks expand. But this is Command Center first, which the Ling is going to see and be able to figure out based off the timing of everything here. And actually got up there to, I believe, see that 3rd CC. Yeah, exactly that. So that's pretty damn nice. I mean, I don't even know if it's 50-50 that it would be a 3rd CC after a Command Center first, especially when it comes to Byun. I would say in particular, you have to be wary of Byun, even if he does opt for something that is greedier to start with, the Command Center first. This can actually lead into a still very powerful, like, 2-base attack. We're still into a 2-base 2-1-1, which is very old school, but you throw it out every once in a while and catch your opponent by surprise, you know. So that is actually a very important scout, doubly so because Byun is a master of builds. It does not shy away from old builds or builds that are considered, I suppose, not as good. Not as in meta, certainly. So seeing that the 3rd CC, Solar doesn't have to worry about very much at all. Now, he's already gone into a pretty respectable speed timing here at the absolute fastest, but still. And we'll have to worry about the Hellions, but basically good queen positioning will take care of that. Maybe a handful of Lings, just in case those Hellions do try and take advantage of possibly greedy Zerg, who is trying to be as greedy as you are. Going Command Center first, Barracks Factory, and then into a 3rd CC. It's about as greedy as a Terran player can get, although I do think we actually did see a 3 CC off single barracks at Katowice, and that is literally the greediest you can get. There's no 3 CC before barracks, so that wouldn't make any sense, because then you wouldn't be able to get an orbital. But yeah. Basically, this is the realistic one. And checking on the follow-up is due diligence here. I mean, seeing if it is a starport, basically the biggest check mark to check off, saying if it's a Banshees or a Liberator, or possibly even still faster into a 2-1-1 off a 3 CC. Well, it isn't any of that, is it? Starport is only coming down now. Emphasis on the triple barracks production soon to add on 4th and 5th, because you are just powering up the economy at this point, literally right now, actually. And you do get basically all of the greed and economy out of the way. You shove that in the condensed, first 5 minutes of the game. And then by minute 6.5, you're pretty much good to go, and it's the real StarCraft, if you will. Solar is tasked to prepare for that, while keeping in mind there is still the possibility of Hellions diving. Only 4 Hellions, but that is enough to actually dive into a mineral line, so you do have to be a little wary. You can see these Hellions have not had any chance to do so. Solar splitting up his queens like this, deflecting the Hellions, whatever pathway they choose, and you can't get all the way to the right side on Alcyone, as it is blocked by minerals and rocks. But Solar did mine out his, as you can see. Byun, I mean, technically you could try and dive through here, but at this point the creep spread is also very good. I mean, these queens are approaching the halfway point on this map. The Hellions have tried their bestest. They've tried, guys, but there's only so much you can do against the creep spread masters these days. And everything seems to be going swimmingly for the Zerg. 73 drones. A couple more will actually basically round them out to almost perfect situation, maybe over 80. It'll be the eventual goal, but you know that around 6.5 minutes is when you really need to worry about being attacked. We can see that Byun actually moves out just prior to his medevacs. So that gives him a little bit more of a head start that might surprise the Zerg players thinking, oh, I have a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds rather, to go ahead and build Banelings. Well, maybe not. So you do see Solar having to cancel a 5th base, but not really too much off his back for that, honestly. It was a brand new one anyway. And then the Banelings did finish, so this really should not be complicated. Now, the armory is done. And also because 1-1 did finish, that needs the armory. But it also means that these Hellions can become Hellbats, add a little more pepper to this attack. That Solar really should have enough units. And even with the Queens coming together, doubly so. Lings, Banelings, Queens, Focus Fire, everything going well, except the upgrades. But this is just not a big enough Terran force to really be concerned about that. Only if it was, like, only Lings. And these Marines were backed up against a corner, would you worry about those upgrades not being done? Finally finished, though. 1-1 is done for both parties, but as you can see, Byun is going to be naturally ahead. He started his faster. He's ahead by about 30 seconds, but Solar was damn quick about starting his 2-2. I mean, both players macroing almost to perfection. I'm going to say almost because I haven't been paying that close of attention, but I'm going to guess it's pretty much perfect. Byun's on 3cc. He is also going up to 8 racks. That is very, very important to note. Again, you got to bring this up when you talk about Byun, right? A lot of other Terran players won't go for an 8 racks anymore. These days, not so much. Maybe once in a best of 5, but, you know, Clem, one of the top performing Terrans, doesn't really go for an 8 racks too often. Maru, a ditto, doesn't really go for an 8 racks very often. Byun, he is the one that you have to be worried about more so bringing this out. Now, typically, this doesn't go into its truly all-in the older sibling, I suppose, where we saw the 8 racks a few years ago, which was always all-in. If it doesn't work, I'm screwed. Nowadays, if you do an 8 racks, obviously you do have the lack of splash, but you do add on a 4th command center, and you kind of feel like maybe you can move forward from this. But obviously, the 8 racks has to do damage first, because your 4th CC is significantly delayed. I'm not sure Sorrel actually knew about this. Quick check on his scout, and you can see that he's not scouted anything past the Overlord in the main base, so only now probably really figuring it out. With the lone tank anchoring a decent number of Marines, probably figured it out. Yeah. If this was anything else, you know, there's probably, I mean, Widow Mines, I would say, first of all, but then I think he already would have had a couple of tanks on the front line, but the emphasis went on all the reactors on the barracks and then onto the factory building a tech lab. As you can see, it even got put down in the natural at that point. But let's talk about the action right now. Solar tried to set up a little bit of a run-by. It was kind of caught a potential drop and run-by of Byun, but, you know, kind of ditto both of them having to be wary of the possibility there. Solar would love to buy more time to get to Vipers. If Vipers can come out, these tanks are goners, and you have absolutely zero splash as the Terran player, but they're not out quite yet, and they will not have juice automatically either, so Byun is encroaching on Solar's territory in a really harrowing fashion. This is where Solar's run-by really wants to find some damage, and it does. It actually forces a liftoff on the units that were scouting for this. They do try and get safely behind that wall, but they're only safe for so long. Banelings bust on through. Tank doesn't help out too much, and this is going to be a bit of a distraction, and it looks like a distraction enough that I was distracted, and Byun was distracted. All the carcasses of the Marines right there tell a very sad tale for Byun. He picked up at the last second is what looks like happened, so he saved 6 Marines, but he probably lost a good 20. Actually, that's yeah, that distraction was perfect, and I just helped to really illustrate that by also being distracted. That's what I'm going to blame. That's what I'm going to say I tried intentionally very much to do. But without the Marines, it's like the tanks also wouldn't have been enough, even if they weren't blinded clouded. But obviously taking them out of the equation as well means that Byun doesn't really have a leg to stand on here. Even as he tries the last second micro his Marines against Banelings. Solar, he lost technically a base. You know, he canceled this one but got it reestablished. He had to cancel and give up on the gold base. That's fine. But he has been mining fairly comfortably off almost 90 drones for the entire time. The 4 bases would have been running dry if this was still a threat. As you can see, minerals are gone. But a 5th base actually had been made. So that's not even the primary concern. And even if it was 4 bases only and it was running dry, I still think Solar's done good enough. Now, you don't want to underestimate someone who's gone for an 8 racks, especially as Byun has really fully committed. This is an 8 racks of old, guys. Lifted main command center. Absolutely no intention to try and make this into a macro game. You do not want to underestimate this type of player, as they can build a lot of Marines. And Marines are pretty freaking good, especially when they get that +3 done, which is going to finish as I'm speaking. Now, Solar, not too far behind on his own +3 armor, is in a better state than most Zergs at this point. That big run by that absolutely distracted Byun has really taken the wind out of Byun's sails. So as long as Solar doesn't have some other catastrophe, like a major supply block or a forgetting to build Banelings, like, I don't know, I think he's going to be fine. As you simply do not have enough splash to really deal with this. Either Marines off of creep with the splits can only do so much against the Zerg ward right here. We got Parasitic Bomb going down on the Medivacs. Banelings continuing to crash in despite the tank's best attempt to stop it from going down, and Solar is remaxing behind this. Now that was a little bit too far gone probably, as Solar is forced to evacuate only with a handful of Hydras. You do want to be careful about trying to full send as a Zerg player and then not having any Banelings whatsoever. That is actually the weakest point, and the point that the ARAX is basically looking for is to exhaust the Zerg player out of Banelings primarily. If they can exhaust them out of their actual resources by killing bases and keeping them rebuilding in very insufficient engagements, then that's good. But usually what really kills the Zerg player against the 8-Rex, against the ultra-aggressive Terran player, is the, oh shit, I don't have any Banelings moment. But that did not happen, did it? Even though Solar did reach very far off of creep and there was enough Marines left over, Solar had so much room to evacuate to. He had so much room to run back home, reinforce, and then the creep spread still would have to be cleaned up as well. And hell, even if he had to give up the space, that still wouldn't have been the end of the world, actually. Although Byun is finally getting an actual 4th base. We got another run off of creep here. Solar just feeling very confident, and as well he should. Both tanks basically taken out of the engagement. One of them actually got a couple of last-second firing, and oh, a big old drop, actually. That was not the full extent of Byun's army. Solar miscalculating perhaps for a hot second. Forced to once again run back home, but only after his hatchery is dead. Now, his drones were saved, so it's, again, not the worst thing in the world. But Byun is really trying to make some magic happen. Managed to find some pocket change, start up that +3 armor as well as this 4th base. It's actually going to finish on the gold. That will be a much-needed influx of cash. Oh boy, I think he also finally built a 2nd factory, and those are the 2 things you're missing from an 8-Rax. You're missing your 2nd factory production, and you're missing your 4th command center. Now, you also are kind of missing Marauder production. Usually the extra 3 Raxes, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, there we go. Usually that's tech labs, actually, in a more macro-focused 4cc, 5cc, 6cc situation. And that actually adds the chunk that changes the dynamic, especially if it's including all of the drilling claws, widow mines, and whatnot. But this is a kind of a easy dynamic to figure as far as the sizing up of the situation. It's just whether or not the Terran player has more than you expect, or their splits are much better than you expect, or if they're also dealing damage back on your side of the map. That can convolute things, but as you can see, Solar has sized this up correctly and is now just fully on engaging to the other side of the map. He does not care about the limited number of Marines that Byun has back there, nor does he care about this base once again falling. He would care a little bit more about the gold base falling, but a couple of lurkers come in, and there's not much that a Marine ball can do. They did try, though. They actually took out all but 2 lurkers. I mean, I want to be excited for Byun, but it's so damn hard to be when Solar had gotten so far ahead. As you can see, the gold base doesn't fall, but even if it did, Solar would still have all of this army to work with, and the recovery time would be plenty. Blinding Cloud's going down on both tanks and Marines, but the Marines didn't actually move forward into Banelings. They moved forward into Hydras, which was okay, but it's just numbers. It's just numbers at this point. And Solar has won out surely on the numbers. Byun bringing out, yeah, kind of an old-fashioned style of play. It wasn't a 2-base attack, which he also does, but it wasn't 8 racks, and a fully committed 8 racks. But I can just guarantee that he lost way too many Marines when I wasn't looking. When he wasn't looking. All right, just to be super fair, all right? My observing isn't the best, but, you know, the Terran player also got distracted. We had like 400 APM. But yeah, this moment with the distraction, you can see, actually Byun was paying attention. That's so many Marines that are balled up, though. Not paying it. Oh my god, that is a freaking disaster. Oh, jeez. Yep, that would do it. Yep, I was not wrong. This is all the bloody carcasses and all the leftover blood of Marine deaths. So yeah, just really confirming that happened. That basically did Byun in. 20, 30 extra Marines would have gone a long way in this game. It's only game 1, so let's head into game 2. In the top left of Site Delta, it is Solar from Team Vitality now. And in the bottom right, we do have the Red Terran Byun for the Shopify Rebellion. Byun trying an 8 racks, kind of did the one thing that you're not supposed to do. That was weird. That's also weird. Okay. Which is to lose a big ball of Marines. So I think what happened there, as far as the strategy or tactics, whatever you want to call it, right, is I feel like there's been a real resurgence of this whole, in my opinion, incorrect feeling that StarCraft 2 is only a mechanical game. It's really not, even amongst the pros, even as things have been obviously more figured out over 14 years. But anyway, you know, yes, if Byun was faster and could look at 2 places at once, magically, then yeah, he would not have lost the big ball of Marines. But then there's also that split-second decision that you have to make in that situation as a Terran player, which is, do I ball up my Marines to be aggressive, to attack into a potentially vulnerable Zerg player, because I think I have enough, because that helps me control the Marines a lot better, that helps me stutter step the Marines, obviously, or do I pre-split, do I pre-concave, and then maybe I don't get the chance to jump on top of retreating units, like Queens or Lings or whatever it is, but if I don't pay attention for a split second, I won't lose nearly as much. And Byun basically decided the former when he was able to pay attention, and then because of that, didn't really ever get to do the latter as he was distracted. But if he had not bundled up his Marines when he thought he had an opportunity, when he saw the Zerg player retreating all the way back to the mineral line and the excitement got to him, which is probably what happened, then he might have been off of, well, a little bit more off of creep, and he might have been covered a little bit more by that 1 tank or the 2 tanks, whatever it was, and he might have also been more concave. So yeah, the Banelings hit him when he doesn't realize it, but he loses 15 Marines, not 30, or whatever extreme number actually went down. But yeah, anyways, it's obviously still very, very fast. It still requires APM, but there is a little bit there that could have been anticipated, as Byun also was aware that there was a run-by. That's he saw it with his drop. His drop returned back to kind of give him the heads up, or even take care of it if it wasn't super big. And then he actually controlled his drop that was scouting for it. He tried to bring it back at the last second, but that, again, cost some attention away from the front lines. Anyway, just super over-explaining that. We watch a very typical 1-1-1, or maybe not so typical. This factory didn't swap over, did it? It did not. Actually, Byun really seeming like he would change his plan even multiple times. Because he had an SCV go out and then come back and another SCV go out. So it kind of looked like he was thinking about either proxying or doing a forward racks. And then his supply depot placement is a little funny. Exactly. I don't think there's any benefit. I'm trying to think. Just supply depot there, then the reactor is even more guarded, isn't it? On this side of the map. I mean, I guess this just... It doesn't matter, actually. I can't visualize it. But the point is he did it, and certainly the SCV juggle is where I'm more so thinking he might have changed his mind. Then he goes into a 1-1-1, yes, but without changing over the factory. The Hellions aren't coming in nearly as much. It's more about the Marines and the Medevac. This is a older build that Byun was doing a lot before the Turax really took hold. Yeah, I think that's chronologically correct. Yeah. And this actually even had a couple of cheeky follow-ups, such as a battlecruiser. That was one of the cheekier ones. But as you can see, it does eventually kind of go into a more normal opener, shall we say. Hellions off the reactor and a Banshee off the starport with Tech Lab. Oh, an armory's coming down, though, so he's going to turn this into a Hellbat attack with the Marines and the Medevac. So you can do this with Marines and Medevac, I think, a little bit faster, but then it wouldn't have the Banshees. And wouldn't have the potential harassment of the Marines early on. Now, these things can be kind of annoying as they can go after Overlords, right? That's pretty much the most annoying thing they can do. However, actually missing the opportunity to scare this away. Although correctly hiding further Hellion production. Oh, nice touch there from Byun. Very nice. Actually, that might have even been intentional. I mean, I'm like, you know, he knows that I know that he knows kind of situation here, but that might have been intentional to leave the Overlord there to be like, yeah, totally, man, only this many Hellions, don't even worry about it, and then actually hiding the rest. It's kind of a cool move. It's also the guaranteed Overlord kill, and he would rather go chasing around, I guess, for these ones that could have been in the middle. There weren't any, because Solar is usually a very conservative Overlord placer. But let's stop talking about that and start talking about this Hellbat attack, which Solar has zero idea about. A Banshee distracts all the Queens from gathering in the front lines, and here come the Marines and the Hellbats. Totally unexpected. Solar has 9 Queens and 20 Lings, and the Queens are at least all together. They weren't on the forefront of the creep, which is a little disappointing, but they are out together, and that's kind of the most important thing about defending a Hellbat attack. If you don't have Banelings, now Baneliness is done. Lings can start turning into Banelings as I am speaking. There they finally go. The Hellbats are now charging after those drones, the Banshees being the most problematic part of this push because there are no Overseers. The lair had only just finished. One Spore Crawler helped out a little bit, and no, they got destroyed. At least, safeguarded the drones. The Hellbats had to tackle that one first and foremost. The drones will survive, the hatchery will survive, and the Overseer is now here. And all in all, a good handling of the Hellbat attack for a Zerg player who had no idea it was on the way. Obviously, there's a possibility off of Byun's opener, but the amount of possibilities that Byun has is actually something you can't really just check for. Or predict. He could have gone again, even into a kind of a 2-1-1, but like a later version of it off of only 2 Hellions. He could have gone into a 3rd CC faster. He obviously just could have gone into 4 or 6 Hellions, or even just the 2, and then moved on to a 3rd CC and then extra barracks. There's a lot of things he could have done. So the Hellbats, definitely not on the forefront of Solar's mind, but good thing that he at least was wary of a starport pumping out Banshees. Because he knew about the Medevac, obviously, but if he just said, oh, Queens will deal with that and didn't build these Spore Crawlers, the Banshees would have done even more damage. The Natural would not have been protected, and this wouldn't have been there to get that last shot, I feel, on the one Banshee, I think is what happened. But it is now done and dusted, isn't it? Byun did not get an extreme amount of damage done. He didn't take an extreme amount of damage either, as you can see here. Lost a Banshee, lost his Medevac, and that's actually kind of the sorest point, because the Medevac could continue flying around with Marines, or even Hellbat dropping, yeah, as well. But oh well. So he lost a bit more gas, but Solar did, at the end of the day, lose more minerals, Overlords, Queen, drones. I think the drones mostly, again, from the Banshee, which, oh, finally, both of them are dead. It certainly offset Solar, having to use his Queens for defense and transfuses, and then delaying his 4th hatchery, I think, happened as he was just caught up in all the hubbub, right? Makes a lot of sense, and he did lose some creep spread. So Byun has opened up an opportunity to attack in on the front of the 4th base at this point, before Solar's really prepared to deal with this choke and this position for the tank. The tank doesn't hit the hatchery, but it does cover the Marines' retreats. That and the Hellbats. The Hellbats make sure that the tank can't just be immediately jumped upon, which would usually be the ideal situation for the Zerg player. Send those Banelings after the Marines, send the Lings after the tank, and then hopefully you have enough, right? Not the case with all these Hellbats. And they can even soak up banelings. Overlords do have speed, actually, so maybe they won't die, but it's still very obnoxious to handle this position. Solar is going to do the wise thing and try and go for a run by. Cancels a 4th base, but it had only just begun. It's not the biggest cancel in the world. And a nice defensive tanks as well. Good cancel on a 5th base over to the right side with a double drop, and Byun is cooking. Solar can't nip anything in the bud, so he's constantly playing catch-up. Catch-up on the economy, as far as the perfect Zerg economy that he would want. He's actually getting there. 81 drones, 4 bases, going on 5, but he's not quite comfortable because he's missing creep spread, he's missing army, and he's missing a lot of map control. He's really only reacting to things as they're happening, which is less than ideal. Fortunately, his reactions are getting stronger as he starts to get a real handle on the situation. Spore Crawler will in the main base help with the drop, but he will still have to worry about his 5th base, and the 4th base, well, basically, it's just a matter of time before he gets enough reinforcements, because the reinforcements are not coming in for Byun. So yeah, that is what Byun had to worry about. That's what Solar was waiting for, and now it is about taking the best possible trade, which, you know, probably was pretty good. Even as all the army dies for Byun, that was a lot of Ling Baneling that was sacrificed in that, and it really took a while to clean up too. The creep spread still non-existent on the 4th base, and not really getting too much further anywhere else that we're looking because the action has been non-stop. Finally, things slowed down a little bit. Byun gets his 4th base, sends it over. Byun actually has a 2nd factory this game as well that is being used too. And 2-2 upgrades on the way, a little bit faster for Byun, akin to our last game as well. Maybe about 15 seconds this time, though. But Byun obviously in a much better position to get into a more mid to late game. Double factory, upgrades, 4th CC, Marauder production, which he actually has 4 tech labs here, so he is producing quite the chunky army alongside the now triple Widowmine production, which will eventually have Drilling Claws too. So really hitting his stride. His medevac drop that survived manages to bypass the Spore Crawler wall, kill a queen. Probably won't get too much more. More importantly, Byun on the attack. Pretty freaking good. Oh, jeez, the Bane's coming from behind, though. Oh, my God. The Widowmine was perfect. Oh, that was a disaster. That was almost a perfect situation for Solar, and then it was the most imperfect situation you could ask for. Byun actually handling that really well, because you could see he was like, okay, on the front, not enough banelings. Let's go after the front. Oh shit, the banelings are from the back. I gotta run. Wait a second. What if that Widowmine pops off on the banelings? Boom, it happens, and he just continues finding more value. You could see like the thought process when you watch the movement of the Terran player. A really nice split-second identification. For Solar, I'm not sure he meant for literally all of his banelings to be coming in from one direction. Because, particularly off of creep, right? That's a real gamble, and that gamble did not work out. Is able to build more banelings, but is once again on the ropes when it comes to defending a new base. And in fact, his last base is under attack. Like, he wouldn't mind friendly firing much more there, but we do lose a handful of drones by the looks of things. 24 drones have gone down in this game so far, and the hatchery does take more damage. Also lost mining time, as we still have constant aggression from Byun, who's just taking so many better trades. It really did start with this particular attack and that Widowmine popping off, but it'll also end with this attack, as Solar simply doesn't have the army. In the blink of an eye, a relatively evenish looking game turns into one of the easier games for Byun. He just got such a commanding position to the top side. And it's all, you know, a ripple here, you know, that spreads out across the pond and eventually affects Solar this way. The Hellbats offsetting him, the drops offsetting him, the creep spread not giving him the heads up a lot of the time, the lack of run-by potential, and then everything just goes to shit before you know it. But, I mean, Solar had a chance to fully recover and get into his very good late-game defensive position. He was one of the best, but Byun hit him in the most important position right before he was settled. So now that ties up the series 1-1. Game 3 will determine who moves on to the GSL and who has to try again later. The last map will be Oceanborn. On the bottom right it is Solar, and the top left it is Byun. Byun striking back, getting that game number 2. He had a good position. That was the type of game that Byun would usually feel very confident about. And it was a map that kind of ripple effect I think would hurt even more. It is a more direct and shorter map in the map pool. So Byun doing the jab, 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 jab. Eventual gut punch worked out perfectly. It's just that a lot of times Byun will seemingly be getting into that position, jab, 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 look for more of a gut punch, and then, well, game 1 was a perfect example. Went for the gut punch and actually was distracted and got 30 plus Marines killed. Hit us a handful of banelings. And that can happen to Byun, who has to face a lot of really great defensive Zerg players. Solar, one of the best. Serral, the best. When he faces Zerg players who are not so much dependent on their defense, but perhaps are more aggressive, like a Ragnarok, for instance, I feel like Byun can... I mean, sometimes their games get really weird and convoluted, to be fair, but... Or it's Shin, by the way. His name's Shin now. What's his real name, but anyway. But it can also lean into Byun's favor, because he usually likes the type of game, presuming that he doesn't just die to a banling bust. Or Raynor, for instance. Raynor... can be, one of the best in any department, offense, strategy, defense, if he's playing at his best. Did not happen at Katowice, unfortunately. But we know him as someone who is less inclined to stay back and weather the storm, as a Serral would. We know him as someone who would do a lot of run-bys. Now, Solar's been incorporating one run-by per game, basically, and it's a very smart, strategic decision, right? It's basically what you should do. If you had a... build order that included all of the tactics in a StarCraft 2 game. As a Zerg player, usually one of the things that would be in there would be like, if you're under an extreme amount of pressure, set up a run-by and prepare to use it at some point, Something along those lines. It's just a smart thing to do. But whereas Solar seems to use it basically as part of a whole set strategy, it's very planned out, and okay, this is the time to go for it. Raynor would probably just be trying. It's certainly looking like more of like a feeling out type of player, which I guess that's kind of what Byun is as well. Which Byun, again, might be sometimes forced into a really convoluted situation because he's aggressing and Raynor's being aggressive as well. And so you can get some really sick base trades, but sometimes it means he gets better. Because he can actually win out on the multitasking and the micro and... then have the gut punch, in which case the more aggressive, maybe even riskier Zerg player might not be so well prepared for. That's really the situation we have here, as a whole, right? When you witness Byun versus Solar, which happens a lot, these guys constantly playing each other online. Byun is the attacker, as Terran typically is in this matchup, so it's not a big surprise, but especially Byun is the attacker, 1 base, 2 base, 3 base. And then Solar is the defender. Solar... not likely to try and turn that around, even though that's sometimes a very good maneuver. Go for his own roach attack, or even go into roaches, which kind of handle the early and mid game more. They kind of put the power into the Zerg's hands for a little bit. Yeah, that's Solar. So for Solar, now moving on to Ocean Board for Game 3, I think is going to be quite confident in his ability to win this out, because the circumstances that led to the last game ending the way that it did is not going to happen on this map. It's basically guaranteed. Not that I think Byun would go for the same Hellbat attack and would go for the same maneuvering afterward. I think it would always be different, and we see it is. The Vikings coming out, actually. Although it was still a more Marine-focused opener, a little bit more, and it is still a Hellbat attack. It's going to be a slightly different one. The point is, just the map itself is going to make it different, as long as Solar does... defend as one would expect, which is to perhaps be surprised, but then bring his queens all together and then buy enough time. Exactly what he did last game. This Ling is actually going to get... oh, no, not quite. Good lift. Good lift. I thought for sure that was going to get in there. So I don't believe it saw the additional Hellions, but I'm not certain about that. Okay, I don't think it did, because more drones are on the way. Again, the extra Hellions aren't even a true determining factor of whether it's a Hellbat attack. The fact that there were 7 Hellions out doesn't mean that the armory is also on the way. It could just be an 8 Hellion opener. Nonetheless, Solar is not anticipating the Hellbat attack yet again. Byun found success once. He hopes to find success again. Slightly different version, but same idea. Trying to catch that Zerg player by surprise. Okay, well, the Opal's definitely dead now. It might not have. I don't know. If the Queens didn't attack it, that's weird. You can see Solar is quick to repair that. And just because the Queens are already combined together, there's really not much wiggle room here. If the Queens were disoriented, coming in single file, forced to back up entirely into the mineral line, then things can get a little hairy for the Zerg. But That's exactly how you expect top-tier Zergs to deflect Hellbat attacks, even if they don't know they're on the way. Which, again, I mean, maybe Solar had an idea and just felt very confident that he could deflect it, which is why he continued droning. Almost looks like it was a non-issue, right? But anyway, it wasn't necessarily the damage that the Hellbat attack did last game, although it did do more damage. It literally did more damage, killed a queen, killed a handful of drones, well, the Banshees did anyway. But it also really did a better job at distracting and disrupting Solar. Solar nipped this in the bud, man. He was like, okay, got it, move on. So that's not good news for Byun. But still, this isn't necessarily about what this can do. It's hopefully what it leads into and the amount of caution that the Zerg player has to show against it, and the worry about what follows it up as well. And then, of course, Byun's going to go into his drops and whatnot, usually beyond this. But this case, 2-base attack. So this is exactly the type of thing that I was discussing in the first minutes of this video. Byun, kind of still a Terran player who's fond of the 2-base attack. And to do so after a Hellbat attack is going to go again into that kind of jab, punch idea. But the punch is coming a little bit earlier, or at least you hope it would. Solar does lose a queen on the front lines, but having to siege up this far away is going to give Solar a lot of time to try and buy time. So run buys could not be another thing he tries to go for. Surrounds could be something that he goes for. And of course, more Banelings, so that there's no opportunity for the Marines to pounce on him. Hopefully buys enough time for Solar to get +1 Carapace and for him to get Centrifugal Hooks. That would be the ideal situation. 4th base might not be possible to the south, but another one to the north is also on the way. And here comes that big surround. Doesn't have the speed for the Banelings, perhaps doesn't need it. This is a huge surround, and Byun, not well prepared for it, will barely get out of there with the 3 medevacs alive, but losing all of the tanks, a handful of Marines, and he didn't even get the cancel on the 4th base. That actually turned into a disaster. Well, Byun's second attack might still have some promise, and you don't want to underestimate the tenacity of a Terran player here, but Solar now has +1 Carapace and about to have +1 melee and has speed. So he's really got everything he wants, making sure to start up that +2 Carapace lickety-split. That's the most important thing for him. As you can see, Byun only just now working on his +1 armor, so he is out-upgraded at this point in time. It's about hopefully finding, again, that Zerg player without enough Banelings, because even if you are out-upgraded in such a fashion, we know how good Marines are underneath medics. We know they're pretty freaking good. But can Byun find that moment? Will Solar make that mistake? Well, not so far. He's got 5 bases, 64 drones. One just popped out. And that seems to be good enough for him, as he knows that the 2-base dedicated attack, he's not going to get too greedy. He is building more army and more Banelings. Once again, going for that big surround. Barely doesn't get the full surround on the Marines that time, but most importantly, didn't run out of Banelings, so the Marines could go, oh shit, no more Banelings, let's run forward. If the Banelings fully retreat onto creep, there's just no chance for the Terran player to really take a huge advantage. The double drop still not finding any success. I mean, the lack of mining as we watch these hatcheries might look a little disturbing, but overall I don't think it is. A couple of Liberators show up, and that is an extra annoyance, but we still have a decent number of Queens with some transfuses. Lings and Banelings trying to tackle the Marines, and once again, will be enough. The tanks not tearing down enough units before they themselves fall. I mean, the Marines have got to skedaddle. But the Queens actually, I think, were not being microed as well as they could, particularly the transfuses. I'm not sure they actually went down. There was at least 3 Queens that had it. Didn't see them being used, but I might have missed it. Point is, now 9 Queens have gone down in this game, and only 4 are here. If 2 more Liberators showed up, that could be a really big problem, but as we can see, no Liberators are showing up right now. 2 of them are somewhere. I'm not sure where they went off to, try and harass, I suppose, and 1 more is on the way, but Solar has a very good supply. He's up 20 workers, and he's at an even army supply. Even upgrade to this point as well. Actually, just shy of that +2. There we go. It actually kicks in as I am speaking, so this kind of ended up looking like it was perfect, and once again, just enough Ling Baneling. If there is anything less from Solar when he takes down this last tank, Byun's Marines might be able to stay in their position, micro against the Banelings and Lings, and then get an opportunity. But every time, Solar has just barely enough to ensure that does not happen, to ensure that Byun has to fully evacuate and then has to figure out some other way to try and take down this Zerg player. Things are getting weaker and weaker for Byun as his harassment continues to do basically nothing, and his army continues to be conquered every time it tries to move out. He did lift his main command center I guess he might try and macro out of this with a second engineering bay on the way, but can he ever afford a third CC? I'm not sure about that. And Solar, well, Solar's swimming in money, actually. His main problem is that larva, which makes sense as he lost all those queens. He does have 5 hatcheries, but I doubt they were all being injected consistently. Now should be good to go, but still 1,200 minerals in his pocket. Wish it was on the front lines, would make this engagement a perfect one for Solar. As it is, again, still good. I mean, if he had 1,000 minerals worth of units, and now it's Hydras finally, a little less larva intensive, that would have been a no-brainer engagement. Beyond evac winning with 16 Marines and 2 medevacs means there's some further potential, but hardly. The drop over to the right side has now been completely cleaned up. Solar at 73 drones, almost at 78 drones, 5 bases, trying to get to Hive technology, superior upgrades. There's not much he can do wrong anymore. His army supply still only even really with Byun's. Does mean that, again, anytime you lose out on all your banelings, you don't realize it, you could still be in trouble, but he has 18 banelings, 71 lings, and a growing Hydra count. That can be a little more of that consistent DPS, as long as they're properly protected. Another medevac just went down as well, and I think Byun is SOL at this point. I did predict Solar to win. I really had no idea who actually won here, but kind of worked out the way you would expect. Solar, okay, gets a pretty unfortunate engagement in game 2. A little snowball effect on one of the Terran maps, and yeah, it happens. But then the other times, just really solid defensive Zerg, and Byun can't out-micro him, can't out-multitask him, and can't surprise him enough with his somewhat unorthodox strategies. And Solar now almost maxed out, feeling confident about going out in the map. Gonna just force his way up the ramp. Doesn't even care. Does not even care, just knows that he has enough. Upgrades have evened out, but with the Hydras adding in that DPS, the Banelings actually connecting, and more reinforcements on the way, we can see that Solar is inevitably going to win this game. And Byun will have to try again, either in the losers bracket or in the other day of qualification. I'll go ahead and spoil it for anyone who's really concerned and really sad about the situation we're witnessing here, although Solar Supply is actually not as far ahead as it once was. Hatchery goes down, but then one of 2 command centers also went down. So, I mean, it's still worse for Byun. I mean, okay, that looked a little scary. Maybe Solar was a little over-eager, but he's still winning, for sure. But he was really scared about this. Byun does make it through the GSL. Just not against Solar, who is obviously also one of the favorites to win GSL. Maru is still the most favorite, I suppose, even after last GSL wasn't so super hot for him. Ling run by will kill the rest of the SCVs that Byun had. And Solar will go ahead and just sacrifice his 5th. Putting him back down on 3 bases doesn't look so great, but it is the smarter move, because I think he's also realized things have gotten a little bit hairier than he was hoping. Like, just a tad. Enforcing a defense of a base up a ramp against tanks and Liberator, I mean, you know, it's not necessary, so that's why Solar backed away. And as Solar continues to make wise decisions, Byun just goes ahead and taps out. Literally, it's 0 workers at the time of his tap out. But it does make sense. So GG's. Solar makes it through in his first attempt. Byun makes it through, I think, in his lower bracket. And you'll see both in GSL. But hopefully the games are entertaining. And hopefully their GSL groups are going to be entertaining as well. So thanks for watching, everyone. Like, subscribe, follow, blah, blah, blah. And I'll see you later for more StarCraft 2. Bye.